A few weeks ago, on a typical Thursday morning, I found myself in the middle of the usual rush, getting our two kids ready for school at 7:30. Amidst the chaos, the loud ring of the phone pierced through the morning. I paused, wondering who could be calling so early. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar area code, sparking my curiosity even more. "Hello?" I answered cautiously, bringing the phone to my ear. To my surprise, it was Emma, my wife, on the other end of the line. I couldn't help but wonder why she was calling when we had just spoken the night before. Emma works for a small marketing firm, and her call immediately grabbed my attention. While I handle things at home, taking care of the kids and working remotely, Emma is always on the move, working at a printing company in the heart of town. Despite our different schedules, we've managed to maintain a balance, and together, we make a decent living. We live in a cozy suburban house in Brooksville, complete with 4 bedrooms and a swimming pool. We're fortunate to have a wide circle of friends. But as Emma spoke, there was an edge of worry in her voice. "Last night, when I went to the hotel lobby to grab a newspaper, someone stole my purse," she said, her voice tense. "Please cancel all our credit cards right away and request replacements. I've already told Sophie, my boss, and she's arranging for new American Express cards to be sent overnight. I need them before I leave tomorrow. She's also transferring some money to help me manage for now." "You're usually so careful with your things," I replied, a bit surprised. "What happened exactly?" "Honestly, I wasn't paying attention," she admitted. "I left my purse at the counter while I went to grab more reading material. When I came back, it was gone. The cashier said she was busy with another customer and didn't see anything suspicious. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel staff is checking the nearby dumpsters. I hope they find it. If not, I'll have to rely on a taxi for today's meeting." "Don't worry, I'll take care of the credit cards right away," I reassured her. "I feel awful about it, but other than $200 in cash, we shouldn't have any big losses," she continued. "Luckily, most of my makeup is still in the room, so I'll be ready for the presentation this morning. How are the kids? I miss us all being together." I managed to cancel the credit cards before any unauthorized charges were made, but the missing wallet, along with Emma's driver's license and other non-credit items, had yet to be found. Life went on as usual, but today, something else caught my attention. I was looking through some paperwork when I found a statement from Emma's Fidelity account. She manages a separate investment fund that she inherited after her parents passed away tragically a few years ago. I've always respected her privacy regarding this account, but as I was searching for our home insurance policy, I stumbled across a folder containing monthly statements from her personal account. The inheritance, as I remembered, had been around $350,000. To my surprise, the balance had grown to over $400,000. But what really caught my eye was a $3,000 withdrawal from her money market account that had occurred about 6 weeks ago. Curious, I decided to investigate further and was stunned to find out that she had written a significant check to a local jewelry store just days after losing her purse in Redwood City, where she had been staying at the Silverton Hotel. I couldn't stop thinking about what Emma could have bought for $3,000 at a jewelry store. She hadn't mentioned purchasing anything for me, and I hadn't heard her talk about buying jewelry for anyone else. Her brother lives nearby, but it didn't make sense for her to spend that much on a gift for him. After a few moments of hesitation, I decided to dig deeper. I turned to the computer and looked up the jewelry store. I jotted down their phone number, unsure if I really wanted the answer to my growing suspicion. I dialed the number, and a woman answered, identifying herself as a store representative. After I provided my name and some details about the transaction, I explained that we had an issue with the purchase and needed to check if a store warranty was in place. She began searching through her records, asking about the problem with the rings. I found myself momentarily puzzled, trying to comprehend what kind of rings Emma could have bought. Fortunately, the woman on the phone swiftly clarified. "Oh, I remember this purchase. When she visited our store, she seemed quite upset and mentioned that her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen. She wanted to replace them, which was a bit challenging. While we were looking for suitable replacements, she used the company's credit card as collateral and later sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you've mentioned an issue with the rings, I just want to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty. Is it possible the diamond setting has become loose?" This left me utterly confused. Emma had only mentioned her purse being stolen, never that her wedding and engagement rings were lost. I had no idea why she hadn't told me about the rings. "Thank you for the information," I told the woman on the phone, my thoughts swirling. "I need to talk to my wife about this before making any decisions. I'll get back to you." As I hung up, the woman's slight confusion was nothing compared to the whirlwind of emotions in my mind. Why were her rings in her purse when it was stolen? What reason could she possibly have for carrying them around if she wasn't trying to hide her marital status? To my knowledge, there weren't any professional reasons for her to do so. But if she was trying to appear unmarried in certain social situations, unsettling thoughts began to form in my mind. Thoughts I didn't want to entertain. Could she have been considering an affair? The idea made my stomach churn. Emma and I had been married for 11 years. We had 2 wonderful children, Ethan, age 7, and Sophie, who was 6. I had always thought our marriage was perfect, and that we had a happy, stable family life. Everything seemed satisfying to me, at least until now. Emma travels for work once a month, staying in distant cities for 2 or 3 nights at a time. If she had any intention of acting on those kinds of thoughts, those trips could have provided an opportunity. It seemed like losing her rings had really troubled her, enough to make her purchase replacements that closely resembled the originals. I had bought those rings years ago with modest savings. They weren't extravagant, and crafting similar ones wouldn't have been too expensive. But if her purse had really been stolen at the Silverton Hotel in Redwood City, she should have filed a report with the hotel and possibly the insurance company. I would have known if her purse was genuinely stolen, wouldn't I? I couldn't help but wonder what she had actually claimed was missing. Determined to figure out the truth, I located the hotel's contact number and called them. I asked if they had any record of the theft of my wife's purse. To my surprise, they confirmed that Emma had indeed filed a written report. I requested a copy, which they faxed over shortly after. I sat down with the report, stunned to see it was composed and signed by Emma herself. In her statement, she claimed her purse was stolen while she was dancing in the hotel hall. She had left it at the booth where she was seated, and when she returned, it was gone. What stood out the most was that Emma had explicitly mentioned she was hesitant to involve the police. My mind reeled as I absorbed this new information. Not only had Emma hidden the truth about her rings being stolen, but she had also fabricated a story about where and how it happened. The details didn't add up. Why hadn't she told me the whole story? While there could be some other explanation, the uneasy thoughts swirling in my head were hard to dismiss. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The rings must have been inside her purse while she was out dancing with someone, a man I didn't know. Weeks had passed since the incident, and Emma was about to go on another trip. I realized I needed more information about her upcoming travel schedule. I wanted to understand what she typically did during her evenings away from home. If she was seeing other men, perhaps losing the rings had been a wake-up call for her, a moment of regret that made her reconsider her behavior. If I discovered that Emma had been unfaithful, I knew it would likely mean the end of our marriage. As much as I dreaded thinking about the impact on our children, I couldn't shake the thought that she might not be fit for full custody, especially with her frequent business trips. Ethan and Sophie deserved stability, and I wasn't sure I could provide that if I had to share custody with someone who might have been dishonest. My mind raced, desperately searching for more clues that could shed light on her actions during those trips. What else could hint at what she was really up to? Was she engaging in dangerous behavior, or had she taken steps to protect herself? I needed to know the truth before it was too late. I assumed Emma would opt for protection during her trips. She wouldn't risk bringing home infections or the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy. After all, I had a vasectomy after Sophie was born, making pregnancy impossible. She couldn't rely on the men she met to always have protection, so she must have had her own supply. But one question haunted me. Where did she keep them? It seemed unlikely she would store them at home or in the car, so the most logical place was her office. She probably carried them with her on business trips. Emma often transported her work papers, laptop, and presentation materials in a large briefcase that she kept in her office. But if she had an early morning flight, she'd bring the briefcase home the night before and pack it in her suitcase before heading to the airport. This small detail was critical. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before her departure. Hopefully, her next trip would involve an early morning flight. I made the deliberate decision to stay calm, not letting on that anything was wrong. When Ethan and Sophie came home from school, I kept busy with various tasks, trying not to let my suspicions overwhelm me. Still, the possibility of her infidelity lingered in the back of my mind. When Emma returned from work that evening, I was in the middle of a minor disaster. While preparing dinner, I spilled a dish of beans all over the floor, and the chaos of cleaning it up while managing the kids left me looking disheveled. Fortunately, Emma didn't seem to notice anything unusual in my behavior. After the mess was cleaned, I gave her a kiss on the cheek, and we sat down for dinner as we normally did, engaging in our usual light conversation. I made sure not to give her any reason to suspect I was uneasy about her upcoming trip. "So, you're heading out on another trip soon?" I asked casually. "Yes," she replied with little enthusiasm. "Same old routine. I'm not exactly looking forward to it." My curiosity got the better of me. "If you don't enjoy it, have you thought about applying for a different role? You've been with the company long enough to know all the ins and outs. You could easily adapt to another position." She explained that she wanted to gain more experience before moving into a desk job. I gently added, "But we miss you when you're gone, especially the kids. I really miss you when you're not home." "I know. I'm sorry," she responded, sympathetically. Sensing an opportunity, I pushed for more details. "Where are you heading this time? Will you be leaving in the morning? Maybe we can spend some time together before you go." I held her gaze, aware that Ethan and Sophie could overhear us. Though I tried to keep my tone neutral, my stomach churned with anxiety. Strangely, Emma seemed just as distracted, eating slowly as if she wasn't enjoying her food. Maybe I was wrong about her. But the urge to search her briefcase remained, gnawing at me. "I'm only going to Redwood City, staying at the Silverton Hotel again," she mentioned. "I leave tomorrow morning at 7:30. She added playfully, "I'll need something to keep me going until I get back on Friday." She winked at me, and I forced a playful response, trying to maintain normalcy. To my surprise, she blushed at my reply. Her comment about bringing her briefcase home before the trip reassured me that she wouldn't be stopping at the office before heading to the airport. Given her seemingly sincere attitude in front of me and the kids, it was hard to tell if she was hiding something or if I was simply overthinking everything. But my suspicion was stronger than ever. I knew I had to check the briefcase the night before she left. When Emma came home that evening, she parked her car next to mine in the garage, looking unusually cheerful. I wondered if her excitement was because of our earlier conversation, or if it was for some other reason. After she entered the house, she didn't bring her briefcase inside, leaving it in the car. I was busy preparing dinner, so we sat down to eat. As we finished, she casually asked, "Could you grab my suitcase from the garage after dinner?" "Of course," I replied, trying to hide any trace of suspicion. "Are you all set for your trip?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh yes, it's a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for tomorrow. I'll just pack an overnight bag with the essentials," she said, with a smile that made me wonder how much of what she said was true. In an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy, I casually asked Emma, "Do you have any plans while you're away?" She replied, "No, just the usual routine. The kids and I will stick to our daily schedule during the week. Maybe we can plan something family-friendly for the weekend." Her enthusiasm caught me off guard, but I responded sincerely, "Sounds like a plan." After we finished dinner, Emma kindly helped me clear the table and load the dishwasher. Once we were done, she headed to the bedroom to pack her things, while I made my way to the garage to grab her suitcase. When I checked the car, I didn't find her briefcase where I expected it, but I wasn't surprised. It was securely stored in the trunk. Anticipating this, I had already devised a plan to access it. Later that evening, when I returned to the bedroom with her suitcase, I casually asked, "Do you know where the car keys are? My tire seems to be losing air, and I figured Tom could fix it right away if I take it to his shop." For a brief moment, she looked puzzled, but then she reached into her purse and handed me the keys. "Why don't you just use the spare tire?" she suggested. "It's meant for emergencies." Staying calm, I replied, "Yes, but since we have time, I'd rather get it fixed properly." Before she could change her mind, I hurried back to the garage, started her car, and headed to Tom's auto repair shop. Pulling up in front of one of the service bays, I honked my horn to get his attention. Tom noticed me and opened the bay door, allowing me to drive in before closing it behind me. "What's going on, buddy?" Tom asked, curious. "My tire's fine, but I needed a little extra time to check something else, I admitted hesitantly, sensing Tom might pick up on my unease. Trouble at home? He asked, noticing the tension in my voice. Maybe, I admitted reluctantly, opening the trunk and retrieving Emma's briefcase. Placing it on a nearby workbench, I unlocked it. Tom, realizing a customer had arrived, simply nodded. I've got a customer, so take your time, he said, before heading back to the small shop attached to his station. I meticulously searched through the briefcase, making sure not to disturb anything. My hands roamed over the pockets, and suddenly, I froze. I pulled out a package, and my heart sank. It was an open package of contraceptives, with about 3 pieces missing. My worst fears were confirmed. Carefully, I returned the package to where I had found it and closed the briefcase. Once more, I stashed it back in the trunk and secured it. Just as I finished, Tom returned. Did you find what you were looking for? He asked, his curiosity evident. I'm afraid so, I said, my voice tinged with disappointment and sadness. Mind if I hang around a bit longer? Maybe you could check the tire pressure while I pretend to fix the issue. Tom gave me a concerned look, but nodded without pressing for more details. He really was a good friend. While he checked the tire, I drove out of the bay and pulled up at a gas station. I filled the tank with fuel, unsure when I would have time to do that for her again. My thoughts were racing, and I felt a wave of gratitude for Tom's understanding. As I drove back home, a sense of darkness began to cloud my mind. Panic set in, fueled by anger and frustration. How could Emma betray me like this? Betray our children, our family? The emotions swirled, but I forced myself to focus on what needed to happen next. I had to secure custody of Ethan and Sophie, and to do that, I needed concrete evidence of her infidelity and misconduct. Though Emma had failed as a partner, I knew she was a good mother. The children deserved to have their mother in their lives, even if it was through visitation. My ultimate goal, however, was to gain full custody. She would have to explain her actions to her brother and our friends once everything was out in the open. When I arrived home, I called out to Emma, "Everything's set, just a minor issue with a nail." "Okay, thanks," she replied, still avoiding eye contact. I sought solace in the kitchen, grabbing a beer before settling in with the kids who were absorbed in a TV show. About 30 minutes later, Emma joined us on the couch. By then, my emotions had calmed, but a deep sadness washed over me. The realization that our once happy family was about to unravel hit me hard. To my surprise, Emma snuggled up to me on the couch, leaning in close. She whispered in my ear, "Are you ready for tonight?" I took a sip of my beer, trying to mask my unease. "I think so," I replied, my stomach churning with the weight of everything I now knew. "But I've got a bit of a stomach ache." "Oh, that's too bad, honey," she said sympathetically, holding on to me as if everything was normal. Emma softly said, "I love you." And instinctively, I put my arm around her shoulders, grappling with a mix of emotions. Despite her betrayal, there was still a trace of affection from her, and I couldn't help but wonder why she had done it. Was it for excitement or because she needed more connection than I could provide? I might never fully understand her reasons, but one thing was certain. The trust I had in her was damaged. That night, we put Ethan and Sophie to bed together, and as she kissed our little angels goodnight, I couldn't help but look at her, knowing she would be gone by morning. The kids had grown accustomed to her frequent travels, so they didn't show much unease. Later, we made love, but it lacked the usual passion. Sensing my distress, Emma asked anxiously, "Is your stomach still bothering you, dear?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, but I can handle it," desperately hoping she might choose our love and our marriage over her upcoming trip. "Do you really need to go on this trip?" I asked, wishing deep down that it was all just a nightmare that would disappear. She sighed, her voice apologetic. "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to wrap things up quickly and be home as soon as I can. I'm really looking forward to spending the weekend with you and the kids." With a heavy heart, I sighed. "Okay, honey, it's time to get some sleep. You have to be up early for your flight. I'll take a quick shower now so I don't have to worry about it in the morning." "Okay," she replied. As she stepped into the shower, an impulse struck me. I decided to check her suitcase, curious about what she had packed. While the clothes on top seemed businesslike, I was surprised to find, upon closer inspection, a selection of her most seductive lingerie and a small black cocktail dress, the one she always looked irresistible in. Respecting her personal space, I carefully returned everything to its original place, closed the suitcase, and went back to bed. Sleep eluded me. Around 5 a.m., I heard Emma stirring. I remained in bed, choosing not to say goodbye as was our usual custom. I felt a mix of weariness and sadness. She bent down to give me a kiss on the cheek before leaving. "Still not feeling well, honey?" she asked softly. I nodded, struggling to express the storm of emotions inside me. When I heard the garage door close, I finally got out of bed and made my way to the shower. I knew the day ahead would be challenging. After sending Ethan and Sophie off to school and eating breakfast, I turned to the phone book and began searching for private detective services. I needed an agency with a nationwide presence, preferably one with a branch in Redwood City, where Emma was headed. After calling a few agencies, I found one that had a local office near her destination and set up a meeting for that same morning. Next on my agenda was to find a divorce attorney. A friend had recommended a lawyer, and I called him, arranging an appointment for the afternoon. I needed guidance on how to handle the difficult road ahead. At the private investigator's office, I explained my concerns and provided them with a photo of Emma, as well as details of her travel plans. They assured me they would surveil her, gather photos, and compile a report on her activities once her business day was done. For smooth communication, they agreed to send updates via email to their Redwood City office, promising to provide a comprehensive report by Monday morning. Satisfied with their commitment, I made a substantial prepayment for their services. They informed me that while they couldn't guarantee photos, they would do their best to gather as much incriminating evidence as possible. I agreed, saying that it would be enough. My afternoon meeting with the lawyer went as expected. He explained that in our state, divorces follow a no-fault principle, meaning there's no need to assign blame. As the primary caregiver for our children, I would likely be granted custody, though Emma would receive significant visitation rights. Our property would be split equally, but since our incomes were similar, alimony wouldn't be necessary. However, because I would have custody of Ethan and Sophie, Emma would be obligated to pay child support. As for her inheritance, I didn't care to touch it. It was hers to keep. My only priority was the well-being of our children. I instructed the lawyer to draft the necessary divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. I also asked him to include a clause requesting that Emma vacate the house immediately after the divorce was finalized. The lawyer confirmed that as the children's guardian, I had the authority to request that Emma vacate the house. It was agreed that once Ethan and Sophie turned 18, we would sell the house and divide the proceeds equally. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of relief, realizing that life would move forward for me and the children, while Emma would have to face the consequences of her betrayal. At that moment, I didn't take immediate action concerning our finances, insurance, or other legal matters, thinking I would have enough time to handle these things after serving her with divorce papers. Given her inheritance, I assumed she wouldn't be too concerned about her share of our joint savings. When school was over, I went home to greet the kids as they got off the bus. That Friday afternoon, when Emma returned from her trip, I kindly offered to take care of her laundry, but she politely declined, insisting she would handle it herself. I couldn't help but grin, fully understanding why she preferred to manage her own laundry. She needed to keep her extramarital affairs hidden. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Emma expressed concern about my ongoing stomach issues and suggested I see a doctor. "This has been going on too long," she said, her voice full of worry. I responded playfully, telling her that I planned to try a new medication a friend had recommended. I expressed hope that it would take care of the problem and hinted that perhaps she would see a healthier, happier me soon. When we embraced, she whispered, "I miss you so much." I couldn't tell if it was the truth or part of the lie she'd been living, but I held her nonetheless. On Monday, after the kids left for school and Emma headed to work, I received a call from the detective agency. They informed me that they had a report ready. I told them I'd be there soon, and within 30 minutes, I was sitting down with the office manager going over the details. The manager mentioned that a report, along with photographs, had been faxed over from their branch in Redwood City earlier that morning. Though he hadn't had time to read it in full, He said it looked highly incriminating from the quick scan he'd done. I took a copy of the report and started reading. The subject was identified as Emma Collins. According to the records, surveillance had started at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16th, in the lobby of the Silverton Hotel. Her identity was confirmed by a photo obtained from their Merrickville office, and it was further verified by the AC Company badge she wore. The report detailed her movements, noting that she carried a briefcase as she entered the elevator. At 5:23 p.m., Emma arrived at room 414, and it was noted that she was alone at the time. A photo labeled Exhibit 1A showed Emma dressed professionally as she entered the room. She was still wearing her rings, and the photo had clearly been taken discreetly, likely from a phone camera. Later, at 6:31 p.m., the agents received a signal that Emma had left her room. A minute later, she exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report described her attire as Exhibit 1B. Upon looking at the photograph, it was unmistakable. Emma was dressed in the black cocktail dress I had found in her suitcase, paired with high heels. She also wore the necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. But what stood out the most was the absence of her wedding rings. The photos made it clear she wasn't wearing them. The next photograph, Exhibit 1D, showed Emma seated in a booth with a man, locked in a passionate embrace. The intensity of their connection was obvious, and the photo captured them engaged in a deep kiss. The timestamp on the report indicated that at 8:51 p.m., both Emma and the man left the restaurant and took the elevator back up to her floor. As I read these details, a mix of anger and sadness flooded me. The photos told me everything I needed to know. Emma's affair wasn't just an emotional betrayal, it was physical. And she hadn't just hidden it from me. She had gone to great lengths to deceive our children as well. The investigators had done their job. Now, I had the proof I needed to move forward with the divorce and ensure that I would have custody of Ethan and Sophie. Emma's actions were no longer just a matter of suspicion. They were documented, undeniable. With a heavy heart, I thanked the office manager, collected the evidence, and walked out of the office knowing that the life I once knew was over. Another photo, labeled Exhibit 1E, captured the moment Emma and the man entered her hotel room, specifically room 414. In the image, Emma appeared slightly intoxicated, but undeniably pleased with how the evening had gone. At 11:13 p.m., the man exited Emma's room and left the building. The report included the license plate number of a car registered to David R. Collins, residing at 1424 Azalea Drive in Redwood City. David R. Collins was married and had 2 young children. As I read further into the report, it became clear that Emma had repeated her actions the following night with a different man. The report was signed by the investigator in Redwood City. This revelation filled me with deep anxiety and resentment. It was apparent that Emma had been leading a promiscuous life while away on her business trips, and the betrayal was worse than I could have imagined. Even the loss of her wedding rings hadn't deterred her from being careless. After settling the bill with the private detective, I thanked them and left, making sure to take 2 extra copies of the report, which had been recorded onto a CD for safekeeping. Once I got home, I wasted no time. I immediately called my divorce attorney. I asked about the status of the divorce papers, and the attorney confirmed that they were ready for filing. Without hesitation, I instructed them to begin the filing process and specifically requested that Emma be served the papers publicly at her workplace. The attorney assured me this could be done, and they asked for the address of Emma's office, which I provided promptly. My intentions were clear. I wanted her to feel the humiliation of being served divorce papers at work. It was not only a form of revenge, but also a reckoning for her actions that night. There was no longer any love between us. I could tell that Emma sensed something was wrong. She might have suspected that I had discovered the truth. She hadn't voiced her concerns directly, but she had expressed hope for my recovery from my stomach issues. Oddly enough, she had been somewhat reserved lately, but I chose not to comment on it, ignoring her change in behavior. The next morning, I woke up early after a restless night of little sleep. I immersed myself in work on the computer until I heard the kids waking up. Then, I went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. After the meal, I said goodbye to Emma as she got ready to leave for work. She approached me for a hug and a kiss, but I responded with a half-hearted embrace, urging her to leave quickly. At that moment, I sensed she might have had an inkling of what was about to happen. As I closed the door behind her, I noticed tears welling up in her eyes as she whispered, "I love you." After she left, I felt an overwhelming sadness, and for a moment, I wanted to cry. But I quickly composed myself, knowing I had to be there for the children and get them ready for the school bus. Around 10:45 a.m., the phone rang, interrupting the morning routine. The caller ID displayed Emma's workplace. I answered, but I didn't say a word. There was a brief pause on the other end, as if the caller was hesitant to speak. In a trembling voice, Emma finally whispered, "I'm sorry." The line went silent shortly after, and I remained quiet as well. Emma didn't come home that night, and I wondered if she had continued her deceitful game, acting as if her husband no longer mattered. While I knew my anger was justified, part of me began to question whether I had been too harsh. The children were disheartened by their mother's absence and asked where she was. To lift their spirits, I decided to take them to McDonald's for dinner. When we returned home, the kids were exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Emma called with a request. "Honey, can I come home and pack my things? Can we talk?" she asked. Initially, a pang of guilt hit me, but it quickly disappeared. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 9 and noon? The kids and I won't be here then." I continued, "As for talking, I'll only speak to you one-on-one in my lawyer's office after you've signed, notarized, and returned the divorce papers. Then, I'll listen to whatever you have to say." There was a sob on the other end before Emma replied, "Good." The line went silent again. She eventually signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially came to an end. It turned out that Emma had become pregnant during the affair, and her attempts to hide it failed when the contraception didn't work. Given that she was nearing the end of her childbearing years, it was likely that the truth would have come out sooner or later, even if I hadn't discovered her infidelity through the lost rings. Rumors began to circulate that she had started dating again. If she ever gets close to remarrying, I can only hope she finds something that will bring her the happiness she seemed to be searching for. I've considered honestly warning Emma's future spouse about her unfaithfulness. It seems unnecessary for her to deceive and hurt someone else the way she hurt me. During a meeting in my lawyer's office, I shared these thoughts with her. She pleaded with me to reconsider the divorce, explaining how hard it was not to have unrestricted access to our children. But I told her the truth. I simply couldn't trust her anymore. She then mentioned that she had seen a psychologist who had diagnosed her with nymphomania. She assured me that her impulses were now under control. Even with these explanations, I told her it wasn't enough for me. The fact that she hadn't sought help earlier, before her behavior spiraled out of control, showed a lack of proactive effort. If she had addressed her urges from the start, she might not have found herself in this situation. As I left the lawyer's office, she continued to cry. I had recently reconnected with a school friend who works at a nightclub, and he keeps me updated on Emma. He mentioned that she often visits the club on weekends with different men, behaving provocatively. It hurt to know that my children have such an irresponsible mother. Perhaps she never truly recovered from her nymphomania. Not long after, a friend of Emma's reached out to me, informing me that she was in poor health and needed my help. Apparently, Emma had contracted herpes, yet she continued her promiscuous lifestyle. While I sympathized with her health struggles, I made it clear that I couldn't help her, nor did I want to. Emma had chosen this path, and with it, the consequences that followed. On the bright side, I've started dating again, and it seems I've met someone special. She's around my age and has been through a divorce as well, having ended her marriage after discovering her ex-husband's infidelity. What I admire most about her is her strength and resilience, qualities that stand out to me. Even better, my children seem to like her, which makes me feel that this relationship is moving in the right direction. I believe it's only a matter of time before I consider taking things to the next level with her. It feels like a natural progression, and after everything, I'm hopeful about this new chapter in my life.